All right. Happy Easter. It's not dropping around Easter time, but we're recording it in the octave of Easter. So hallelujah. There, I said it. Welcome to the Living in the Virtue of Your Strengths podcast. My name is Matt Ingold. I'm a certified Gallup CliftonStrengths coach and also a certified Catholic coach from Metanoia Catholic, where we train and we coach other Catholic coaches. And we also have a great environment, a membership area called the Metanoia Catholic Academy. The people on this call that you're going to be listening in today are members of that Metanoia Catholic Academy. Go check it out at catholiccoaching.com. And to continue to get updates on our YouTube channel, our Metanoia Catholic YouTube channel, please like and subscribe so that you can get the next updated podcasts as they drop. All right. Our focus here on the Living in the Virtues of Your Strengths podcast is exactly that. Not just naming, claiming, and aiming our strengths, but how do we name, claim, tame, and aim our strengths? Because our strengths, those habitual ways that we think, feel, and act, they can show up in ways that build the kingdom of God or pull the bricks off the building. And so that's what we want to explore today. How are we living these strengths out? How can we claim these things? And how can we start to tame them so that they can be used in a way to reveal the total glory of God on earth as it is in heaven? So we've been going through a lot of those strengths, and today we are focused on deliberative. So I am going to start my PowerPoint presentation, share my screen. Here we are. Our focus is deliberative, and we are going to be looking at this execution talent. What motivates it? What's the driver? Okay. Where does it show up virtuously or viciously? And then what are those mindsets behind it? At Metanoia Catholic, we are Catholic mindset coaches. So we believe that words become flesh. So those habits that you see a deliberative person, somebody high in the strength of deliberative, those habits you see them exhibiting, they can show up virtuously or viciously based on the mindsets that are behind them. So that's the trajectory of our podcast here. But we're going to be bringing in people on the call. I always do my straw poll with everybody that's on. We got a good amount of people on here. Most of them are right up like in the lesser themes area. We had a huge swatch of people that had like 33. We got a 6 on here too, with Michelle and Jen's not on the call, but we got some spouses of people that are high in deliberative. So they're going to be sharing some of their perspective on their spouses, high deliberative. And we're going to come to know deliberative a little bit better here, but more importantly, how to appreciate deliberative and how we might live it out in a virtuous kingdom building way. Okay, so let's go to our scorecard. They give us a little packet here when we get certified over at Gallup. And this is just a really high level overview of this deliberative talent. So I am being, okay, so the deliberative person would respond to these questions as such. I am a vigilant observer of potential risk. I will, what are they going to do? Anticipate things that could go wrong. I bring, what's their contribution? A thorough and conscientious approach. Conscientious approach. Having a tough time saying that. I need, what's the requirement? To show up in that place of contribution effortlessly. Time to listen and think before being expected to speak. And I'm curious, I want to plant the seed because I want to hear from our people that are high deliberative. If you've ever been in a position where somebody needed you to make a decision right now, or you got a spouse and you were expecting them, you high activators were expecting your deliberative spouses to make a decision right now, how did they respond? Okay. I love, what are the things they value? Restraint and caution in the face of risk. I hate, again, revealing what they value. A rush to judgment. What are those metaphor images? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and a jury must deliberate before there is a verdict. And what's that barrier label? Hesitance. It's the early bird that gets the worm. Okay. So overly cautious could fall into that barrier label. But we're going to jump here to our word picture. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see what I'm explaining. If you're listening in, this is what we've got that kind of starts to paint a picture of deliberative. So the first thing I have is something that's probably not familiar to anybody that's never been in the military. All right. It's called an operational risk management chart. Okay. So something that we always had to do whenever we're doing a training operation, when we're in our planning, we do something called operational risk assessment. And it was just a process that you would go through to identify risks and then put in controls to mitigate some of those risks. And I think that's an important thing here is deliberative can often get pegged as like they don't want to move forward. They don't want to do anything. They just want to avoid risk at all costs. And that could be the shadow side of deliberative. Okay, so we're starting to lean into how it can show up viciously. But deliberative, I think, is more motivated by mitigating the risks so that we can have a smooth execution. That's why I got that sailboat that's over at the other end of my picture here, smooth sailing. That's what deliberative wants to accomplish, I think. I've got a picture of the jury in the courtroom. All right, deliberative, they need that time to go into their room and deliberate on their verdict. Got the caution tape image. I remember Father Bill Hansen had him on the podcast about a year and a half ago. He deployed strengths at his parish up in Long Island, and he had a day where they had a party. I would love to go to this party, and it's such a nerdy party to want to go to. But that you had to dress up as one of your top 5. And he said there was a man who was high and deliberative, and he was completely wrapped in yellow caution tape. And that's how he showed up. I've got an image of Final Jeopardy, because again, when you're thinking through, you can always hear the Jeopardy music. Boom, 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 right? They need that time to just quiet and deliberate where they're going to go. I've got the minefield. So deliberative again is that it almost looks a little bit futuristic. I can see my futuristic restorative. I'm not high deliberative. It's 28 for me. But it can, or 24, excuse me. But my futuristic restorative can often have what looks like one of those strengths babies Michelle Dunn's always talking about. And yeah, it can kind of show up that way. Ounce of prevention, pound of cure. All right. So deliberative certainly weighs heavily the merits of prevention versus the cure. And ultimately here, smooth sailing. But for people that are high deliberative on the call, what are some things, or people that know somebody that's high deliberative or just knows the strength, high deliberative? I'm going to go to my go-tos on this. Justin, you're always good to weigh in on these things. I know your wife, Jen, is high in this. Jane, you got a hand up. What would we add to this picture? Jane.
Something that my husband hasn't taken his strengths, but I know that he is deliberative in his top 10. He reminds the children continually, measure twice, cut once. Concept, make sure you do it, prepare and then execute. So, maybe you could have a little workshop of something, measuring the wood or something like that.
Got it. Tape measure, something like that. Measure twice,
cut once. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I can see my father-in-law being high up this, because sometimes when we're doing a construction project, I mean, he will measure thrice, 4 times. I mean, but and then I'll cut and I'll get it wrong, and we'll go out and we'll buy some more wood. What else? What else can we add to this, folks? Anything else? Justin?
I mean, for me, I'm seeing the idea of a crossing guard. I mean, the person who's not just saying we shouldn't do this, but who's literally standing in the middle of the road with a stop sign that's saying you're not going to pass until what's happening is done, because it is not safe. Or I guess along those logic, you could throw that scene from Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is standing on the bridge and slamming his staff down in front of the monster, telling him, "You shall not pass."
Ooh, epic. We could throw some. I love how you said it's the person that's actually holding the stop sign that's saying stop. Gallup will often use that analogy of they're the ones that are slamming on the brakes, right? And so I know we've got activators. Margaret, I'd love to call you on here because I know you're so high activator, high positivity. You share that your husband is high deliberative here. An activator paired with deliberative can often be a combination where we see some friction that's here. Margaret, is there anything that you can share just based on living with high deliberative?
Well, recently I had an experience where I'm number 1 communication. And he's like number 34 communication. So I was telling him something I thought, and then I wanted to make sure that I gave him space to respond. So I said, what do you think? And he's like, okay, I really don't like it when you do that, when you just put me on the spot like that. And I'm like, what, so it's been a lesson to learn that he wants to deliberate over what I tell him. He wants to just think it over, to hear it. He's not ready to respond right away. And that's just because he processes over time, whereas I kind of just, I don't know, short circuit processing.
Oh, you ready to go? Like it's, and a lot of it comes down to how we learn, how we prefer to
Yeah.
learn. And people that are high activator, it's like, we will learn along the way. And then
Yes.
deliberative is more like, but we don't have to, because learning along the way can often be a painful process as well. It's like, it's school of hard knocks at that point. And even the way that he responded there, Margaret, is indicative of that deliberative, even the words that they choose. There's a lot of deliberation and intentionality around the words that they choose. So you see somebody that's high communication, high deliberative, they are going to be very selective of the words. So they may not necessarily be an external processor. I even had something like this. I'm not necessarily high deliberative, but I have that melancholic temperament that's secondary. And Erin and I were like kicking around a new course that we wanted to put together. And she's just like, so what do you want to what do you want to deliver them? Like, what's the outcome that they're going to walk away with? And I was just like, I need to go take a shower. And it's just like, I just needed to like cut away from the conversation. I came back and I was like, listen, babe, I'm sorry if it like came off as abrupt. It's not you. I have a tough time jumping right in. I feel this pressure to jump right in and have a response ready to go. And it's not like how I need to go and retreat and just take some quiet time for that. So, versus I imagine high communication. She's also high communication. You guys are stuff talking it out, right? That's awesome. That's an awesome insight, Margaret. Thanks so much. Anybody else have something to add to this picture? We could add a brake pad. We can add just like, again, that kind of falls into that jury room that needs to go to the deliberation room, right? The jury needs to go into the deliberation room. All right. Anything else? High deliberative. I think it's important to say that like something that anchors deliberative also in getting something done. So I thought about like, it's kind of like, it even resembles discipline in the sense discipline wants to really reduce friction in execution. But also, I think deliberative desires to reduce unnecessary friction as well. I mean, and I think of analytical, right? Analytical is a thinking theme that desires to get it right the first time, to think through the process. And it's like, if I could have done more research or gotten more data, that would have empowered me to make a more informed decision. Then my worst case scenario is coming back and thinking, oh, I could have known more and avoided this problem. So it kind of resembles deliberative there, but deliberative is very much about like, I think even the image that you put, Justin, of they're the one holding the stop sign. So like they're involved in the execution. Justin, I see your hand up. Let's go with Sean. And then Justin, you jump on next. Sean. Sean, you're still muted and you're at number 19, deliberative. That's okay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay,
Once a podcast, Sean.
I know.
Once a podcast, that mute button gets you.
Here we go. So I'm thinking of they anticipate obstacles, and all of a sudden I thought of the scene in the Apollo movie where he's saying, bring me everything they have up there. And then they go, if they don't have it up there, we don't have it here. And it was like he was anticipating every obstacle, and he was so deliberative. It's like, do you know what scene I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm, I do. They dumped everything out in the tube socks and all that out on the counter, and they said, this is what we got to work with. Yep.
Yeah. And he was so fixed on that, so deliberative. And I'm thinking that might fit here, but.
Okay. Yeah. It's like, it's bringing all the pieces out on the table. So it's kind of like the jury that goes in there and they want to weigh all the facts. They want to have all the things considered. Yeah.
They want every detail. They want it in front of them. And it made me think of it when Justin said, the guy that said in front of with the sign, no passing. This is it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got, so Brian's on my team is high deliberative. I lean on him a lot when it comes to evaluating, vendors or new solutions, because he'll ask those probing questions that really get down to the value and what it's going to look like. That I just want to be done with the I want to make a decision, move on. Right. So I find myself delegating a lot of the shopping to him because I know he's got that deliberative tendency. Justin.
Yeah, and just one of the other things to focus on this is that, yeah, deliberative natural tendency is to slow things down, but
Mm-hmm.
deliberative wants success in the end. Like any executing thing, they want the thing to get done. And it's just an important concept to remember that, especially for a lot of activators is a good example where you have to be moving to have success. Deliberative understands that, but deliberative also knows that if you're going in the opposite direction, you're actually not having success. You're having the opposite.
Yeah. Or if you're going to step on a landmine.
Right. Yeah. And that it's really, for a theme that, often gets kind of a bad rap about, just seeing how everything is wrong. It's like, yeah, but there's a reason they're doing that. And they want the same success that everyone else does. It's just they're seeing those pitfalls, and, you have guardrails on your bridge thanks to a deliberative. Somebody built a bridge but didn't think that, you could go over the edge of it. So thankfully deliberative did. And now you're able to actually get across the bridge more often than not. So yeah, just one of those things that definitely bear in mind with this is that they do want success, and they do want it ideally the first time, just like everybody else. It's just they're naturally going to see what's going to stop you, where a lot of other themes aren't as worried about that, sometimes to their detriment.
Okay. All right. And even the way that you're explaining it is, it's even in a very virtuous context. And then it gets the bad rap, and it gets the bad rap like a lot of these talent themes get their bad rap, because we're focusing on the vicious side of it versus the virtuous side of it. So all these themes got a shadow side to them. Let's jump forward and see, like, if there's one thing that deliberative, this talent wants to rest in. All right, this is my shot in the dark. Mitigate risk for smooth execution. And we were kind of jumping around this. So it's not just mitigating risk at all. It, like you said, Justin, it's in the context of getting something done. It is an execution theme. And execution themes want to have some sort of tangible results at the end of this. And so how is this landing? I'm curious for those people that are high. Jane, I see your hand up. Michelle Simpson, love to hear from you at 6. If you've got anything to contribute. Justin, you've got it at 12, but your wife is also at 6. Jane, what you got?
Well, one of the things that was an aha moment for me, again, like I said, my husband, I really believe my husband has deliberative. This is one of his natural strengths. Is he was discussing with my son, who was in college. My son had come home for Christmas, and there was some talk about moving out of the dorm and moving into an apartment. And literally what was an aha moment for me was my husband said to him, find out when the actual date that you have to notify the residency, and then continue gathering your information, and don't make a decision until that drop dead date. And it was such an aha moment for me that, like, oh man, I wish I'd known that like 35 years ago when we got married, because he takes a long time. And then the vicious side of that is when I chose to homeschool, I had gathered all the information. He was in Kuwait back in the day, and I had read 5, 6, 7 books on the benefits of homeschooling. And then he came home and I just like blasted him, and I'd already made the decision. And for 2 years, literally, he would come home and like, did the CPS come by? Like, what did you learn? He was so fearful because I hadn't given him the space to make the decision himself. I hadn't given him the opportunity to do the investigating himself. I had already just, made a decision, like, I'm in a homeschool. This is what I'm going to do. blah, blah, blah. And of course, this was back in the 90s when homeschooling was kind of still avant-garde and, risky, and people were getting arrested. So his fear factor, that analysis, that he was just in the red, and it took him at least 2 years to get into the green. But I've learned how to, now that's what I have to do. Like Margaret said, is like, I have to give him space to process, and then give him that time to make a decision. Going back to that jury, your jury sometimes is out for days and days and days because they have to deliberate, right? They have to review and mull over, and there's no, got to get it done. So anyway, those are insights from a non-deliberative that lives with a deliberative.
Love it. Love it. I love the word that you used, investigating. So creating a space for the deliberative to investigate a bit. And I think one of the things that I'm hearing here, and how you can help your deliberative loved ones or people on your team, is to avoid having just arbitrary decision points, right? Or timelines. They may want to maximize their time of deliberation, but also, at some point a decision, you got to make that. And I think that they're aware of that. But they want to be able to have that value, being able to come to the team and share where they can mitigate the risks, right? I mean, there's great contribution, not stepping on a landmine. Trust me. What else? What else, folks? Anything else before we jump forward here? Janae, what do you got?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to add, I realized I was looking through my brother's strengths. He's actually number 5 deliberative, but he's also got responsibility, consistency, achiever, analytical, like all in his top 5. So I'm sure that some of those really flavor it. But I was thinking about the environment. In our house, I think he was the only one that was like him. And the rest of us, like, really, in many ways, did not create, not knowing, didn't create that space for him. So in many ways, he acts a little bit like he doesn't belong, a little bit like the black sheep. And so anyway, I was just thinking about how, like, it's beautiful to be able to create space for people that have these really amazing talents, that have their place, right? Like, you did not want to play, I did not want to play a strategic game with him. I would lose every single time by a lot. Like, there was no way that I was going to foresee what he could foresee. So I learned early on, like, nope, there's only certain games that I would be able to play with him. So anyway, I was just thinking about that. How it's important with these people in our lives to be able to, like, love them. And because I'm deliberative 33. So this is like very opposite. I'm learning from it more from like the bottom 5 of my abilities. So yeah, that was just a thought that came to mind, knowing that my brother is really high deliberative.
Awesome. No, I know Aaron, I was just looking up, Aaron's at 31 with deliberative. And so again, where's activator fall for you, Janae?
7. Okay. I'm mostly
so
influencing. Yeah.
It is again, one of those unlikely pairs that you find in strengths, is that activator go, and the deliberative slow. Justin, what do you got?
I mean, just looking at this motivation, and I think, in that word smooth, I think the concept of safe can't be underestimated in this too. It's really whatever the deliberative person deems is a safe way to move forward, because it's not so much, smoothness can come from, being responsible with resources, managing time and all that. And those are all important, but really what will bring a deliberative to an all stop on anything, and you will never see stubbornness like you will with a deliberative person, is when it comes to an issue of whatever they deem to be safety, either physical, spiritual, emotional, whatever it is. If you tag that unsafe button on them, you've just run into a wall. And like, I think Jane's example is a really good one for her husband to get over, because for him it was an existential threat to kids, real or imagined, regardless. That's what stands in the way. And when a deliberative is flagging that, you can't just not pay attention, because if they see it, they see it for a reason. And it could be made up, but more than likely, if they're seeing it, because there's something to it.
I think it's a really good distinction that you're making there, Justin. It's not just like it's the safety factor and the smooth. When I think about the word risk assessment that's associated. Risk implies that there's a risk of some harm, right? I used to sell insurance, right? You needed to have some sort of a, an insurable interest whenever you got insurance on something. And insurable interest was like this thing that you want to insure. If something happened to it, there would be some harm that would be, experienced by that person that had insurable interest. So that's even something insurance or an insurance person could be another thing that we could add to our word picture here. But you're right. There's association with some sort of harm if we don't do our job to mitigate the risk, not just smooth execution, but we want to avoid harm. I always think slow is smooth is fast, right? Is one of the things they always said in the military. I can still remember one of the days when praise God, nobody was, we had a guy who was concussed at this, but nobody lost a life or limb. We had a vehicle hit an IED, and in my just kind of like I launched the quick reaction force to go out and secure the scene and assist with any sort of casualty evacuation. And they just flew out the door, and they were riding over the hill. And next thing you know, boom, they hit an IED. Again, praise the Lord, nobody was hurt, but we went a lot slower. We were much more deliberative in our response, recognizing that a quick reaction force that hits a landmine is suddenly not so quick. It's another problem that needs to be dealt with. Okay, awesome. Let's jump forward, and thanks for all the contributions on that. We're going to start pivoting the conversation into our virtue vicious discussion. So we always turn to scripture here to inform us on how this talent can show up virtuously. So pulled this from the book Living in the Virtues of Your Strengths. Actually, this is from the Bible, and they pulled it from the book Living in the Virtues of Your Strengths, Catholic edition, or excuse me, Living in Your Strengths, Catholic edition. And we have Luke 14:28-30. So we'll read this. We'll have some quick Lexio conversation on how this hits us, but we're asking that question, how is the scripture informing us of the virtuous way to live in this deliberative talent? All right. Gospel according to Luke. Which of you wishing to construct a tower does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if there is enough for its completion? Otherwise, after laying the foundation and finding himself unable to finish the work, the onlookers should laugh at him and say, "This one began to build, but did not have the resources to finish." The gospel of the Lord. Praise you, Lord Jesus Christ. Okay. So I can tell you one of the first things that kind of jumps out here is, and it's kind of shocking to me, but like the onlookers look at him and they laugh at him. And why do they laugh? There's almost like when there's a foolishness that is that happens when there's a lack of being deliberative, a lack of consideration. So I think deliberative can also kind of be a way of not living foolishly. There's a prudence that's being highlighted here as well. So prudence being one of those 4 cardinal virtues, that certainly is being pulled from this. So it's prudent to be deliberative. But there's also some like foresights. So there's that virtue of foresight, which is the ability to use our God-given reason to anticipate an action or an outcome before we actually go through it. So I can make sure that when I'm taking my daughter to the park and it's 85 degrees outside, I'm going to take a water bottle and some sunscreen with me, because I know that here in Florida, she's probably going to get thirsty and need to have some protection from the sun. So, but that takes me thinking before we get into the car and drive to the park and mitigating some of that risk. It starts to show up a little bit like a ranger. A little bit here as well. I'm seeing some echoes of a ranger in this talent. But what else here, folks? So there's certainly the virtue of prudence, the virtue of foresight that's showing up here. What else is this scripture teaching us about how to live virtuously and deliberative? I think also here, which of you wishing to construct a tower? All right. So it starts with a desire. And when we desire something, we're not resting in that object of desire yet. Think of a map, right? And maybe you're in New York and you want to go to Los Angeles. Okay. So your current waypoint is in New York, but then there's the endpoint in Los Angeles. There's quite a bit that happens between those two waypoints. And if all you do is you just kind of, just step off, but there's no real plan, you might run into some problems along the way that perhaps you could have avoided. I remember a buddy of mine, he ran across the United States like Forrest Gump, started down in San Diego, and ended over in, I think in Long Island is where he ended up. But he had to put months of planning it. He had a budget that he wanted to be very conscious of. So he had a limited budget. He had to have the right amount of supplies. He was pushing this baby stroller in front of him, and he ended up getting a bunch of phone calls. Cops pulled him over a couple of times while he was jogging, thinking that he was literally pushing a baby through the desert. People were very concerned. But he had to avoid certain highways. He had to, he encountered a mountain lion, when he was trekking along the ways by himself, tens of miles away from the nearest help. So, again, there's a desire and we want to move towards a desire, but whenever there's a desire, it's prudent for us to sit down and consider what are the things between us and that desire. But it's not just what are the physical obstacles, what are our interior obstacles even? What are the vices that we have that may be standing in the way of us getting to this desire, this object of our desire? Jane, come on in.
The phraseology, calculate the cost, reminds me of a song. It's literally counting the cost. And the refrain says, we're counting the cost because you are worth it. And so I think of our own spiritual life. We just celebrated Easter Vigil and I was part of the RCIA process. So we had 15 baptized and 31 that received Holy Communion and confirmation. And that was my continual kind of beating on the drum through the whole process of like, understand the counting of the cost that you're coming into. You're going to be Catholic. You have to count the cost of this is going to affect your life for the rest of your life. It's not just this one and done, right? It's a continual life-changing event. Now you have rights and responsibilities. Now you have a goal towards heaven. Are you prepared? Are you ready for the race? And I also think like a marathon as opposed to maybe, the 50-yard dash, right? It's the long haul of counting the cost of the, deliberate, can I do this? Can I get there? And what am I willing to put in the effort? But so I was just thinking spiritually, are we willing to put it in? Because sometimes, we saw that during COVID when everybody shut down and, it took a long time for people to come back to Mass because Mass was online and they got comfortable. So anyway, those are my thoughts on this reference on this.
Yeah, Jane, I love that you're bringing up RCIA. I've never looked, I can't recall the actual stats, but I have heard something that if we saw the amount of RCIA candidates that actually stuck around after the first year and they were still going to Mass, I think it was in the book by Father James Mallon. He brings this up, Divine Renovation. It's kind of depressing to look at the amount of people that leave. And I wonder if they leave because there wasn't really a revelation, an honest revelation of what it means when you're saying yes, that you want to be Christian, you want to give your life to Christ. what that entails, what the risk, what the demands are going to, like what the total cost is of that. Now, there's another great book by Michael Hall. I'll give you a sec here. That is called Intentional Accompaniment that I've been reading through. Michael Hall is he's part of CCO, which is like the Canadian focus. And one of the things that he really highlights is that moment of the initial conversion when you are making sure it is a definitive moment where somebody knows what they're saying yes to, and you're inviting them to say yes at that moment. And it needs to be, it's intended to be a watershed moment. But if it's wishy-washy, you're not going to get really a full yes. And maybe that's something that like Deliberative wants to be all in. I wonder if there's a motivation there. Like Deliberative just wants to be all in with the way forward and how we're going to be able to do something. So there can be a full yes or a full no, regardless.
And
Jane, what do you think?
And just I totally agree as far as the individual, but also going back to Father Mallon's book, which I read, it's phenomenal, is the fact that the parish, how they want to construct the tower. They want these new members, but are they calculating the cost in the the long haul? Again, it's that long haul. Now that, Easter Vigil, but a year from now, how are we going to serve, and how are we going to incorporate, and how are we going to include these new baby Christians? How are we going to build their faith, continually building their faith? So it's an end both. Deliberative has to be the community deliberating on choosing to seek the lost, and then guide them intentionally, disciple them, and then that disciple willfully. And then it just also brings back what Metanoia Catholic always brings back of that free will, right? We always talk about the beautiful ability to choose. And so Deliberative really needs that choice, that ability to choose.
Indeed. Yeah. And the time to really weigh the options and to choose here as well. Jane, thanks so much. Anybody else have thoughts on this scripture? Counting the cost or ready to go forward? All right. Thank you so much for the contributions here, folks. Let's jump into just considering again, like now when we talk about the virtuous side versus the vicious side of things, we always counter conversation with leads to interdependence. That's how these strengths show up virtuously. They show up viciously when they're causing someone to go independent, dependent, or codependent. All right. So independent is when I see myself, but I don't see anybody else. Dependent is when I need somebody else to see me so that I can feel a certain way about myself. And codependent is a shallow relationship where nobody's really being called forth to grow, but rather they're just being accommodated to stay exactly where they are in a place where they could really benefit from growing as well. But the virtuous side brings people together. People see the strengths of the other, but they allow, and they also see the strengths of other people, right? So we talked about a couple of people sharing experiences about how deliberative shows up in a married context, right? That's it's meant to be lived interdependently, right? So there's space for that to really shine, that deliberate to shine and be seen and honored. But then the trust is that you're showing up as a sincere gift, right? And that's always our work to do, and nobody else can do that work but us. So here, leads to interdependence. I think it's deliberative is living in interdependence when they help the team move forward smoothly while identifying the risks that can be mitigated. I think we can throw safely in there too, like you said, Justin. So helps the team move forward safely while identifying risks that can be mitigated. So I think I want to make sure that we're still moving forward. It's an execution theme that seeks to rest in some tangible outcome, some tangible product, tangible result. Okay. But if we go over to the vicious side, I think that when it goes independent is when it makes avoidance the priority, or it makes risk avoidance the priority. Excuse me. Okay. So like safety is paramount. And so we're just constantly avoiding anything that could be risky to the point where we're just not moving forward. I think of this even in the military. They don't have the safety briefs all the time. I'm starting to get into the mindset behind it, but it's like, safety is paramount. Safety is paramount. Safety is the most important thing. It's like, yeah, but if it really was, we would never leave the barracks. So training is the most important thing, but we can train safely. So the same thing, we can move forward, and there's going to be risks along the way with any, worthwhile desire we are pursuing. But there's also ways that we can use that gift of foresight and that virtue of foresight and and mitigate those risks. But if we just are not tolerant of any risk, all right, that is when we can go independent, right? Self-serving there. Leads to dependence when needs others to share their current risk threshold in order to feel safe or valued, not saved, but safe or valued. And then that codependence is when it is you're paying lip service and there's a shallow risk assessment. And so the picture that I have in my mind for the codependent relationship is the deliberative person that's sitting at the table that can see the risk, but keeps their mouth shut because they don't want to ruffle the feathers. Or the person that says, hey, this person's high deliberative at the table, but we want to push forward with this project regardless. And so we are either going to limit the time this person has on the floor to share, or we're going to pay lip service to the risk, but we're not actually going to go through the process of mitigating these risks. Okay. So it's kind of like, it's a little bit more of a check of the box. How is this landing here, folks? And anybody resonates or see where perhaps their deliberative shows up positively or negatively? Any thoughts? Justin?
Yeah, I know, in looking at it, especially on the vicious side, you can really see where the codependence one is particularly interesting because you can see where it comes into play where you're not going to be listened to, so you dutifully report whatever it is happened. But when you get in this cycle where you're not going to be listened to, you almost can develop, and I've seen it happen in others, especially they almost end up either in this "I hope you fail" type of mentality,
Schadenfreude.
or
Yes.
right, or they can become saboteurs, in the sense that I told you this is going to fail. Now I'm going to show you how it's going to fail. And it's, in both of those cases, and I think in a lot of these vicious sides, is when the risk and really in the end, it's the fear becomes, what you're worshiping, not the outcome and the goodness that can come from it. I think that's where you see this, but yeah, you can see it where, it tends to be a lot of passive aggressive things where, oh, they missed another deadline, but enough of these things build up. And in the end, they look like, see, I was right. It failed because you didn't listen to me. And then sometimes it's them, turning the wrench the wrong way, so to speak, to push that effort along too, just to be shown that they're right. Because I've definitely seen that on the vicious side of this.
That's interesting, Justin, the way you said that they can show up as a sabotager or a saboteur or whatever the person, one who sabotages the plan or even just rejoices when it actually does fail. Michelle, I saw your hand was up. Something that Justin said, it looked like it resonated with you. You dropped your hand, you're nodding your head. What struck you by what Justin shared?
Well, that's when I was looking at the codependency, I was just seeing, I told you so. I'm assuming I've done that in the past. I told you that was going to happen.
Told you so. Told you it was going to happen.
Yeah. I told you that was going to happen. So that kind of just resonated with me as something that would be the codependent side of that.
I'm wondering if, and this is kind of a question that I had, and maybe you that are high that high in deliberative can share this. I think deliberative is high in the risk, or they can see the risk, but does deliberative also come with the ability to generate the risk mitigation steps, or is that leaning on another strength? Or do you people that are high in deliberative also see a way forward or a way of mitigating the risk as well?
I could
Michelle,
speak
yeah, yep.
For myself. I don't know about, because I had a hard time with this, thinking that I'm not very deliberative. But the more I've thought about it, the more I hear about it, I am deliberative, but it doesn't mean that I always know what the obstacles will be. But I am one to hold more caution. I might see some, or I don't see them right away. Like, I'll say yes to something, and then a week later, as I've thought about it, oh, well, there's these things that we didn't think about that we need to deal with now. And I don't know if that's just unique to me and my combination of, strengths, or if that happens for other people too. But I don't see all of it I don't see all the landmines usually right up in front. And sometimes I can just jump in and then go, oh, wait, I have to take a step back because there's all these other things there. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know you're high restorative as well. You're high on a lot of execution themes, Michelle. And so we can see there's almost like a bias for action in your work, but that deliberative doesn't shut off. It sounds like it continues to consider, and learn the risk as you're moving forward here. But there's not like a running forward that you might see with activator, but there's still a deliberative steps that are coming up as you're moving forward. How's that land? Thumbs up. Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Justin, you got a hand up.
Yeah, just to piggyback off it, and I think, hey, you can differentiate something like deliberative from something like analytical, is that, or even some of the strategic thinking themes, is that, it's those themes that are going to try to project and, see the future, where you're executing themes, they learn by experience. So, a deliberative is going to make a mistake, but it's rare that they're going to make the same mistake twice, because they're going to know every time I come around this corner and I see X, Y, and Z, this is going to happen because that's what happened last time. Versus someone with strategic who comes around it and say, well, I see this, that means this could happen, that means this could happen. That's just how the two modes kind of operate differently. But yeah, I think it's that once bitten, twice shy thing is pretty much a good way of understanding deliberative, and see other themes interacting with deliberative. So someone who is high analytical and very deliberative is probably going to be really slow, because they're looking at all the cues before they get there and saying, okay, well, this could happen and this could happen. And in a worst case scenario, it's the sky is potentially falling everywhere I look, where someone who's probably maybe more executing and influencing things is going to keep going. But when they trip over the whatever, or they run into the whatever, or whatever catches on fire, they'll be like, I need to note that for next time. So
yeah, and what comes to mind as you share that too, Justin, is like the importance of healing in the person that's high deliberative. Because yeah, there are times where you take a risk and you get burned, and maybe it's even burned in a relationship. And that can, if that's not brought to healing, if it's not brought to forgiveness, and we're not transformed by the gospel in that, it can continue to, like you said, the sky is falling. It can continue to kind of cloud that risk, or amplify the risk that's there, versus, keeping us open and make it so we start to shift over into that independent, where we're so cautious because we're so protective, because we just don't want to get hurt again. I mean, it happens so often in our coaching calls that this is something where it's like, I've been burned here so many times, I'm not going to get burned again. But at the same time, it's like, you might not get burned again, but you're also not entering the beauty of the relationship, and you're not, you're kind of staying in that stuck spot. So I can see the importance of healing even being something that's necessary for the person's high deliberative, especially in a relationship area, to be able to move forward and have that deliberative show up in a very virtuous way. Okay, let's jump into some of the mindsets that are behind this. So again, the virtuous mindset, I love asking questions because questions send our brain on a mission. So perhaps the person that wants to live virtuously in their deliberative might ask themselves, if movement forward and advancing the mission were the priority, how could we do that as smoothly and safely as possible? All right, so if we allowed this good, and I think that's a really important thing. So it could be movement forward. It could be, like I said before, a relationship. It could be a task, a goal, whatever that object of desire is. If we make that the priority, so we have kind of the carrots. If we make the carrot, the thing that we're pursuing, the priority here, attaining that goal, how could we do that as smoothly as possible? Okay. And so I think that might it keeps that our minds fixed on the good, right, that we're pursuing. And then the next question is there anything else that the team needs to know? And I think this is, I think of the person that's deliberative, and I get it. You're high deliberative and you're on a team, you're sitting at a table with a bunch of activators or a bunch of people that they want to go through achievers. They want to get it done. They want to get it done now. And you're hitting the brakes. You can start to feel like a broken record or have some thoughts about yourself that you're the wet blanket, or you're just adding drag. And sure, that's our work to do. We have to see if we're adding unnecessary drag. But I've been in a situation where I withheld held some information, and it didn't result well, ultimately in execution. And so bringing everything to the table, and then they can do with it what they want, still giving people the freedom to choose, especially based on where you're at, who the final decision maker is in that situation. But I think part of living responsibly and deliberative is recognizing that you have a gift of being able to see those obstacles in the future. That's a gift. And they can do whatever they want with them, the rest of the team. But they can't do anything with them if you don't share it. Okay. On that vicious side of things, going independently, safety is paramount. I think we can look, self-protection is paramount over there as well. Being invulnerable is paramount. Right? All these things that can lead us down this independent path. You should be more concerned. I think that could type of thinking can lead you to being more dependent. Again, those should statements, often indicative of those manuals that we have for people and how they need to be thinking, feeling, or acting in order for us to think, feel, or act a certain way, for us to feel a certain way. And then finally, this codependence, that ignorance is bliss. Right. I just see like a washing of the hands where there's this, we were describing, Justin, you shared this, almost this feeling of resignation when you've been rejected or so many times that you just kind of say, you know what, I'm just going to stop bringing deliberative to the forefront here. It's just not appreciated. But then there's that sabotaging, self-sabotaging, team sabotaging behavior, that schadenfreude, rejoicing in somebody else's demise. That can be some of those vicious after effects of it. Folks, what do we got here on the mindset side? Okay. Jane, what do you got?
Yeah, I love these questions that you have on the virtuous mindset, Matt. Again, going back to our own family life and being able to use, like, literally, that's one of the things that I have learned from strengths. Even though my husband has not taken the strengths, I can see that he has deliberative high. So I lean in on his deliberative. And I just love that. Is there anything else that the team needs to know? That's one of those things that he, our youngest is 17. He's a senior, he's going into college. And so he's asking, we've got things to prepare for, orientation, and those, it's always those wonder questions. And my son the other day, he kind of made this comment like, oh, Dad always, he always tries to find the worst scenario. I said, well, first of all, that was his job in the Army. He was the world-class op force. So he has to think like the enemy. That's his gift. But second of all, when he thinks for anything else, what else can go wrong, then we're better prepared as a family. And therefore you're going to be better prepared because you are only 17 and you haven't lived your life. And when I put it in that terms, when I was able to use the communication and the connectedness, then my son was able to look at a different perspective and appreciate his dad's, gift. And it's probably one of those things, the vicious side for many years, like I mentioned, is like, I'm sure that's his thought was like, you should be more concerned, because I would be like, it's not really that important,
Mhm.
but he's sitting here like, no, it is important, let's make sure all the tires are filled before we go on a trip. And,
Right.
he has this whole checklist. So I love it. But again, it's from not just the virtuous mindset, but it's an act. It's coming from a space of love and desire for the best of the team. Like you said, safety and smooth. How can we get the job done the best possible way? So again, I'm loving deliberative. I don't have it. I'm 33, but I'm learning to like latch on to it for others. Like you said, you lean on your teammate to do certain things because it comes natural, which is the
Yes.
whole beautiful thing about strengths. It's like, yes, I don't have to be all things to all people. I can use this teamwork. So
Yeah. And there's something important that you brought up there. I know you're high positivity, Jane. And Margaret was on here earlier and she's high positivity as well. And you got husbands, it sounds like, that are both high deliberative. But that looking at the worst case scenario can be an exhausting place to live as well. And I think that can happen to a toxic effect, right? So if everything was just constantly looking at worst case scenario, that's the lens that you're going to look at the world. And I don't know if that is a healthy lens to look at all the time, right? So there is perhaps deliberative. We can invite deliberative also to consider the likelihood of the risk. And so worst case scenario, they can put it out there, but the likelihood, and this is even something we teach in our coaching certification, right? Like, what's the real likelihood of this worst case scenario happening? Like that needs to be factored in. That's why I love that operational risk assessment. It's not only does it force you to identify all of those risks, but then the likelihood of it happening, and then putting those things together is where you get this result for your risk assessment. And then you start to be able to take the mitigation steps for it there. So, all right, folks, that's deliberative here. So thank you so much for contributing to the podcast. We've got more to come on this. If you want to join these podcasts, join the Metanoia Catholic Academy. That is where we are assembling. It's an online Catholic coaching membership community where we are using mindset coaching in alignment with our Catholic faith to grow virtuously and become the people we are called to be and live the abundant life that God has planned for us. So exciting stuff. We can't wait to see you there. Thanks for being with us. Tune in next week. Please like and subscribe as we drop more podcasts on the Living in the Virtues of Strengths podcast. All right. Blessings, everybody.